A terrifying, tidal wave-like malevolent aura swept down from the sky, blotting out the sun and plunging the world into complete darkness. Even the blazing sun was fully hidden, and the entire realm was shrouded in gloom. Countless onlookers trembled, their eyes locked in shock on the massive demon pillar that appeared behind Mu Chen. The pillar, standing at least 1,000 feet tall, resembled a towering pillar of the heavens, exuding a terrifying aura. Even the man in the blue robe in the hall couldn't suppress his change in expression, his eyes flashing with awe and fear. What exactly was this pillar? It was terrifying beyond imagination. Up in the sky, Mu Chen paid no mind to the countless astonished gazes. His blood-red eyes burned with a crazed intensity. The demon dragon child had exerted all his strength. He, too, was giving everything he had. If he lost, not only would they all fall into dire straits, but it would also disgrace the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, diminishing its prestige across the North Tsang continent. Clearly, that was not something Mu Chen wanted to see. His blood-red eyes surged with intensity as he growled low, his arms raised in an embrace. To everyone's shock, the enormous demon pillar, over 1,000 feet tall, tilted and swung into motion. Boom, boom. The surrounding spiritual energy stirred, forming a massive vortex as the entire spiritual force within tens of thousands of feet surged toward the pillar. Although this was not the true form of the great Xun'er demon pillar, but merely a projection, its power far exceeded Mu Chen's expectations. An ancient evil artifact, its reputation was well-deserved. While Mu Chen had never fully experienced the power of such divine relics, he was certain the great Xun'er demon pillar was no weaker than the so-called divine artifacts. It was just far more vicious. If not carefully controlled, it could backfire, corrupting the wielder with malevolent energy. Had it not been for the mysterious black paper suppressing the evil energy within him, Mu Chen feared that the great Xun'er demon pillar might have already turned him into a shell of suffering. Boom! The spiritual vortex spun wildly, and Mu Chen's eyes blazed even redder. With a ferocious roar, countless spectators watched as his hands gripped the air, and the 1,000-foot demon pillar swung toward the blood-red, dragon-wrapped heavy sword hurtling toward him. The sky seemed to explode with the movement of the pillar, and below, within a 1,000-foot radius, the buildings collapsed into ruins, the ground itself crumbling as well. Those unable to escape were sent flying, spitting blood as they tumbled through the air. Boom! The black demon pillar fell with unstoppable force, smashing into the black heavy sword with a resounding clash. Clang! The sound of metal clashing rang through the air like thunder. The blood-red dragon coiling around the heavy sword howled in agony, cracks spreading across the blade, which exploded with a deafening bang. The blood-red dragon detonated, and the heavy sword unleashed a torrent of spiritual power in an attempt to resist. Yet as the demon pillar pressed down, the sword trembled violently, its spiritual glow dimming in an instant. With a final thundering crash, the sword plummeted to the ground, embedding deep into the earth. Mu Chen's most powerful strike was almost crushed beneath the demon pillar. From afar, the demon dragon child watched in horror. His strongest attack had been easily neutralized. What in the world was that damned black pillar? Before he could think further, his eyes widened in terror as the black demon pillar didn't dissipate. Instead, it carried with it a massive vortex of spiritual energy descending upon him. The surrounding space seemed to freeze. Fear surged in the demon dragon child's eyes, and he hurriedly shook out his sleeve. A palm-sized black scale shot out, rapidly enlarging to form a shield of scales, enveloping him in defense. This was the best protection he could muster. Bang! The enormous shadow descended, and the black scale shield cracked upon contact with the demon pillar. A muffled explosion rang out, and the shield shattered in the demon dragon child's horrified gaze. The demon pillar fell with unstoppable momentum, landing directly on the demon dragon child's body. Boom! The low, thunderous sound reverberated through the massive city. Everyone could see a dark shadow plummeting from the sky, smashing violently into the earth below. The ground trembled, and visible shockwaves rippled outward. The air was filled with smoke and dust. The black demon pillar in the sky, which had been thousands of meters away from the city, finally slowed to a stop. It gradually became more illusory, until it completely dissipated. The overwhelming malevolent force also faded, and warm sunlight once again bathed the land. However, it couldn't dispel the cold that clung to their bodies. The onlookers stood frozen, staring at the tall silhouette in the sky, their backs drenched in cold sweat. If that black demon pillar had descended, who knows how many lives would have been lost in this city. In the sky, Mu Chen's crimson gaze quickly faded. He immediately covered his mouth and coughed violently. Blood seeped from his fingers, and his face turned exceptionally pale. The malevolent force was indeed powerful. Although it had helped Mu Chen turn the situation around, it had clearly caused him severe injuries. Had it not been for his thunder god body, which had strengthened him significantly, he might have already been gravely wounded by now. Wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, his eyes still cold, Mu Chen gazed down at the dissipating smoke. With a flick of his sleeve, a fierce gust of wind blew through, scattering the smoke completely. As the smoke cleared, a massive, deep pit appeared in the earth. In the center of the pit, the demon dragon child lay bloodied, his bones seemingly shattered, unable to move. The once arrogant and domineering demon dragon child now appeared pitiful, resembling a stray dog, utterly defeated. In the distance, Tung Long and the others stared in horror at the scene, their bodies trembling. This outcome was clearly beyond their expectations. Who would have thought that the malevolent dragon child, whose presence exuded such ferocity, would end up failing? And to make matters worse, he was defeated by a freshman from the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Mu Chen's gaze shifted toward them. Tung Long and the others shuddered. Though they knew Mu Chen was in poor condition, the fear in their hearts kept them from daring to confront him any longer. Mu Chen ignored them. He waved at Su Xian and the others, who immediately soared up and rushed toward the West Desolation platform. They tore apart the iron chains trapping Lin Zheng and the others, rescuing them. Facing their rescue, Tung Long and the others dared not interfere. They just hoped that this god of slaughter would not come after them. Clearly, they no longer had the courage to face Mu Chen. Mu Chen exhaled in relief as Lin Zheng and the others were saved. His murderous gaze once again fell on the demon dragon child. Though the latter was already severely wounded, to eliminate the root of the problem, this opponent could not be left alive. Cold light flashed in Mu Chen's eyes as he extended his finger. A surge of spiritual energy, burning with black flames, shot out like lightning, heading straight for the demon dragon child's head. He intended to obliterate him here. A gasp was heard from the onlookers upon seeing Mu Chen's ruthless move. This Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy freshman was no ordinary person. Even in such a moment, he had no intention of showing mercy. The demon dragon child, seeing the incoming energy beam, changed his expression drastically. Had he been at his peak, he could have easily withstood such an attack. But now, with his bones shattered, he was unable to dodge. If hit, death was certain. Struggling, the demon dragon child could not move. For a moment, he could only watch helplessly as the energy beam approached, a deep fear of death rising in his eyes. The spiritual energy beam streaked across the sky, but just as it was about to strike the demon dragon child, the space around him suddenly warped, forming a protective spatial shield around him. Whoosh! The spiritual energy beam slammed into the shield, but it didn't even cause it to ripple. The beam was instantly obliterated. Mu Chen's face changed instantly, and he barked, "Who?" Luoli, Li Xiantong, and the others also grew serious, their eyes alert. Anyone capable of warping space at will was definitely beyond their ability to deal with. Heh! Northern Heaven's Spiritual Academy has indeed produced a fine talent this time. A faint voice suddenly echoed through the air. Though not loud, it silenced the entire city. The man in the green robe at the main hall also changed his expression. He soared into the air and looked toward the warped space. The figure, cloaked in black, appeared to be middle-aged, with slightly graying hair. Yet his eyes were like two black holes, so deep they seemed impossible to fathom. At that moment, he stood with his hands clasped behind his back, a faint smile on his face, gazing up at Mu Chen in the sky. Black Dragon Supreme? Li Xintong and the others were shocked when they saw the figure, their faces changing drastically, unable to conceal their astonishment. Mu Chen's heart trembled. Black Dragon Supreme? What exactly does the Dragon Demon Palace want? Even a supreme being has appeared. The entire Western Desolation City was thrown into turmoil at this moment, everyone staring at the figure in the black robe. Although there was no fluctuation of spiritual energy around him, the pressure he exuded made everyone in the city hold their breath in fear. A supreme. That was a terrifying existence capable of erasing this entire city from the face of the earth with a mere gesture. Such a being was one of the top superpowers on the entire North Tsang continent. I feel a trace of an old friend's aura from you. The Black Dragon Supreme chuckled. Since his appearance, he hadn't even looked at the severely injured Devil Dragon child. His gaze was fixed on Mu Chen, his expression warm, though that warmth sent a chill deep into one's bones. Mu Chen's expression darkened. Facing such a supreme-level presence, he had no means to resist. Heh! It seems the great Xun'er demon pillar has fallen into your hands from White Dragon Supreme. The Black Dragon Supreme sighed, then stretched out his hand with a soft smile. That belongs to our Dragon Demon Palace. Return it to me, and I'll allow you to leave unscathed. Mu Chen's eyes shifted. He hadn't used the great Xun'er demon pillar's full power, but to his surprise, the Black Dragon Supreme had still noticed it. Dream on. Mu Chen gritted his teeth. Despite the other being a supreme, it wouldn't be so easy for him to obediently hand over the great Xun'er demon pillar. Although it's not ideal to act against a junior, I imagine most will understand since it's to recover our Dragon Demon Palace's treasure. The Black Dragon Supreme smiled softly. Then, with a wave of his hand, Mu Chen felt the space around him freeze, rendering him immobile. Mu Chen clenched his fists. So this is the power of a supreme? No matter how many tricks or trump cards he had, it was impossible for him to truly oppose such strength. The Black Dragon Supreme's finger pointed into the air, and Mu Chen felt the great Xun'er demon pillar inside his body tremble slightly, as if trying to leave his body. Luckily, the mandala flower emitted a mysterious purple glow, sealing it. The Black Dragon Supreme's eyes flashed with surprise as he looked deeply at Mu Chen. So you have some treasures inside you as well? No wonder you can endure the malevolent force of the great Xun'er demon pillar. But the treasure of the Dragon Demon Palace will be mine today. As his voice fell, black ripples spread from his palm, resonating with the great Xun'er demon pillar inside Mu Chen's body, causing it to tremble violently. Mu Chen's face grew paler. He could feel that he was about to lose control of the great Xun'er demon pillar within him. It's time to hand it over. The Black Dragon Supreme smiled, his hand clenched, and Mu Chen immediately felt the great Xun'er demon pillar quake violently. Just as it seemed it would break free from its seal, the space in front of Mu Chen distorted violently. A towering figure appeared out of nowhere, and a broad hand fell on Mu Chen's shoulder, releasing an overwhelming power that immediately suppressed the internal tremors. With a wave of his sleeve, the frozen space shattered. Then, the figure's eyes, as deep as the starry sky, gazed calmly at the Black Dragon Supreme, whose warm smile had now faded. Black Dragon Supreme, you've broken the rules. His calm voice echoed through the sky, and a terrifying pressure filled the air. The spiritual energy in the world seemed to stop flowing. Countless people trembled, wondering just how terrifying this strength was. The Black Dragon Supreme glared at the towering figure in the sky, his eyes slowly turning icy cold. Heh, I didn't expect Taitsong, the headmaster of Grandsong Academy, to personally appear. This is truly an unexpected turn of events. The Grandsong Academy headmaster gazed at the space where the Black Dragon Supreme had disappeared, his brows furrowing slightly. A cold glint flashed in his deep eyes. Over the years, countless students who had ventured out into the North Tsang continent for training had met their end at the hands of the Dragon Demon Palace. This had turned their enmity into a nearly irreconcilable grudge, one that seemed impossible to resolve. Though the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy would love nothing more than to eradicate the Dragon Demon Palace completely, achieving that was not so easy. The Dragon Demon Palace had a profound foundation on the North Song continent, one that, in some ways, even surpassed the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. They had once been the rulers of this continent, until the emergence of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. In the last great battle, although the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy had narrowly won, they hadn't truly eradicated the Dragon Demon Palace. The Dragon Demon Palace's true strength still existed, and that was what the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy had been cautious of and wary of for all these years. They didn't want to risk confronting it, as doing so would come at a tremendous cost, possibly even resulting in the fall of a Supreme. Such a cost was something the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy could scarcely bear, especially since their competition wasn't only the Dragon Demon Palace. They also faced numerous powerful spiritual academies from other continents. The name of the 5 great academies had brought the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy fame, but it also placed them in the eye of the storm. Countless other spiritual academies, equally powerful, were waiting in the shadows, watching for the moment when the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy would weaken. When that time came, they would strike, replacing the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy as one of the 5 great academies. This kind of competition was equally brutal. "Headmaster, what is Sacred Spirit Mountain?" Chen asked, a bit curious. The Grand Song Academy headmaster glanced at Chen and said, "It's a sacred place on the North Song continent, said to be passed down from ancient times. It opens once every 3 years. If one manages to enter Sacred Spirit Mountain, they can receive a tremendous opportunity, known as the Sacred Spirit Baptism." Sacred Spirit Baptism? Is it similar to the Spirit Light Baptism at our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy? Chen asked, pausing in confusion. The headmaster couldn't help but smile. If the Spirit Light Baptism could be compared to the Sacred Spirit Baptism, then the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy wouldn't just be one of the 5 great academies. The Sacred Spirit Baptism doesn't greatly enhance strength, but it remains a place that countless talented young people from our academy go mad for, because it can help them establish their foundation. Establish their foundation? Chen frowned. That didn't seem like such a powerful ability. Many rare treasures could do the same. "This isn't just any foundation establishment," the headmaster said with a chuckle, shaking his head. "It's Supreme Foundation Establishment." He looked at Chen and added, "It seems you still don't understand how terrifying the trials are to enter the Supreme stage." Chen gave an awkward smile. He hadn't even reached the heaven-reaching stage yet, let alone the Supreme stage. It felt too distant, even though that was the realm he dreamed of reaching. When your strength reaches the peak of the late heaven-reaching stage, you'll understand. It's not just about taking a single step forward to smoothly enter the Supreme stage. The headmaster's expression grew serious. "It's a real death trap. Countless exceptional geniuses have reached their limits here, even falling into oblivion." "Why?" Chen asked. "Because after the late heaven-reaching stage comes the 3 minor supreme tribulations, a challenge so terrifying that it makes even the greatest geniuses tremble. Only by overcoming these 3 tribulations can one forge the supreme body and truly step into the supreme stage." 3 minor supreme tribulations? Chen muttered. The name sounded strange, but for some reason, he felt a chill spreading from deep within his bones. There are countless geniuses in this world. Many show remarkable talent before the 3 tribulations, progressing rapidly and demonstrating earth-shattering potential. Yet in the end, they are reduced to ash during these tribulations, vanishing into the heavens and earth. The headmaster smiled faintly. "So now you know why supreme experts hold such an esteemed position." Chen swallowed hard, his face pale, nodding. This was the first time he realized just how dangerous and difficult it was to enter the supreme stage. "Does this have anything to do with the so-called Supreme Foundation establishment?" Chen recalled what the headmaster had mentioned earlier. "You're very smart." The headmaster nodded with a smile. "The 3 tribulations are so terrifying that if you're not careful, you'll turn to ash, and even your divine soul will not escape. The Sacred Spirit Baptism can solidify the divine soul, strengthening its resistance to the tribulations. Furthermore, in the worst-case scenario, it can preserve your divine soul during the tribulations, giving you a chance to rise again. Mu Chen's mouth hung open, his voice shaking. Although he hadn't yet encountered the so-called 3 minor supreme tribulations, he could already feel how despairing failure would be. The sacred spirit baptism, however, could save a person's life during those tribulations. This was incredibly important. Perhaps countless powerful individuals qualified to challenge the 3 minor supreme tribulations would stop at nothing to seek this protection. At this moment, he began to understand why the so-called Sacred Spirit Mountain was the grandest event on the North Tsang continent. In comparison, the Spirit Light baptism from their Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy seemed insignificant. At the same time, he couldn't help but feel a little tempted. The Sacred Spirit baptism was so appealing. If both he and Luoli could undergo the baptism, it would certainly give them more security when they later pursued the supreme stage. Headmaster, can we participate? Mu Chen asked softly. Hearing this, Headmaster Tai Tsang sighed lightly and said, most of the people who participate in Sacred Spirit Mountain are the top-tier talents nurtured with immense resources from the North Tsang continent's strongest forces. Our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy doesn't have the advantage here. We once participated, and the student who went was our heavenly ranking first place at the time, but they never returned. After that, we mostly gave up on attending such grand events. Mu Chen was momentarily stunned before nodding. It wasn't that the top-tier students of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy were less talented, but rather it was due to the nature of the academy. Those core geniuses were nearly all trained from a young age by their respective sects and families. The students at the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, however, came from all corners of the continent. Although they would cultivate here for several years, the time wasn't enough to pose much of a threat to those top-tier young talents who had been training for far longer. This created a situation where talented students, once their wings had grown strong enough, would leave the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy to seek stronger paths. Meanwhile, the newcomers could not yet compare to the top-tier geniuses who had been on the continent for much longer. As a result, the seemingly colossal Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy rarely produced individuals who were truly at the top of the younger generation on the North Tsang continent. This was because the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy accepted students, not sect disciples or family members who had devoted everything to their training. Right now, the strongest student on our heavenly ranking is Shen Zongsheng. His talent is outstanding, and if given a few more years of cultivation, surpassing the top-tier young talents of the North Tsang continent wouldn't be difficult. But that's not the case right now, Headmaster Tai Tsang said. Mu Chen nodded slightly. This time, they had struggled so much just dealing with the Devil Dragon Child. How much harder would it be to face the true top-tier young geniuses? Like Imo Xingtian, for example. He was even stronger than the Devil Dragon Child. However, he still felt reluctant to give up on the tempting, sacred spirit baptism. It was important for both him and Luoli. After hesitating for a moment, he gathered his courage and asked, Headmaster, can I give it a try? Headmaster Tai Tsang's gaze hardened as he stared at Mu Chen. After a long pause, he shook his head and said, You haven't been cultivating for long enough. Although I acknowledge your ability, it's still too early for you to participate in Sacred Spirit Mountain. Mu Chen sighed slightly, about to say something more, but Headmaster Tai Tsang waved his hand and said, Gather everyone. It's time to return to the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. The other students are waiting for your news. With a smile, Headmaster Tai Tsang looked at Mu Chen and added, This time, you're likely to become the hero of our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Even the Devil Dragon Child fell at your hands. Mu Chen gave an awkward smile and turned, heading toward Shen Zongsheng and the others. Headmaster Tai Tsang watched Mu Chen's back, a thoughtful look passing across his face, as if he were deep in thought. Meanwhile, Lin Zhang and the others, under the gentle nourishment of spiritual energy, slowly woke from their unconscious state. Their faces were a little embarrassed. Although they had been unconscious, it didn't mean they were unaware of everything happening. Hee, Senior Lin Zhang, the Devil Dragon Child, had already reached the late heaven-reaching stage. We really couldn't handle him. Even I was defeated, Shen Zongsheng said with a hearty laugh. But luckily, Mu Chen did well and crippled that guy. I wonder if he'll survive. Mu Chen defeated the Devil Dragon Child? Lin Zhang and the others were stunned, looking at Mu Chen with disbelief. The gap between the late heaven transformation stage and the late heaven reaching stage was so vast that they couldn't imagine how it could be bridged. Mu Chen shrugged and said, "Just got lucky. The task's complete." Everyone nodded, helping the injured and lifting off into the air. Mu Chen landed at the back, walking alongside Luo Li. He gazed at the girl's delicate, flawless face, her skin as smooth as jade, and quietly extended his hand to gently hold her slender, cold hand. Luo Li's fair face flushed slightly. She shot Mu Chen a playful glare, but he simply smiled and leaned in, saying, "I'm impressive, aren't I?" Luo Li rolled her eyes at him, her expression charming. In her heart, she found it a bit amusing. This guy remained humble in front of others, but acted so smug in front of her. It made her want to bite him. However, when Luo Li noticed the lingering scars on Mu Chen's body, her clear eyes softened. Her small hand gently tightened around his, and with a slight tilt of her snow-white chin, she gave a soft, contented hum, satisfying Mu Chen's small vanity. In the sky, Gransong Academy headmaster nodded at the group and then turned to the West Pole Supreme, cupping his fists and smiling, "Brother Shi, my apologies for the disturbance." "Not at all." The West Pole Supreme waved his hand with a smile. Gransong Academy headmaster didn't say more. With a sweep of his sleeve, spatial fluctuations enveloped everyone. In the blink of an eye, the group vanished into thin air. The West Pole Supreme narrowed his eyes at the spot where they had disappeared, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I didn't expect the Devil Dragon Child of the Dragon Demon Palace to fall. Looks like they'll be one spot short for Sacred Spirit Mountain." The Devil Dragon Child was never really a threat, Shi Qinghai, who stood beside him, said casually, showing little regard for the Devil Dragon Child. "I wonder if Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy will participate." After this, Shun Songxing might even break through to the late heaven-reaching stage. The West Pole Supreme continued. Shi Qinghai shook his head, speaking softly, "Even if Shun Songxing breaks through, he won't be much of a threat. His talent is strong, but his cultivation time is still far shorter than ours." He paused, his voice becoming quieter. "But that new student, Mu Chen, he's quite unpredictable." When Mu Chen and the others returned to Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, as expected, they drew countless eyes, especially when the news of Mu Chen's earth-shattering battle with the Devil Dragon Child spread. The entire academy was shaken. All the students who heard the news stood frozen, mouths agape, clearly in disbelief. To them, this kind of story seemed like something from a fantasy. The super strong, second on the bounty ranking, who even the senior Lin Zhang and the heavenly ranking champion Shun Songxing couldn't defeat, was actually beaten by Mu Chen? The academy buzzed with excitement. Countless people were eager to learn more about the epic battle that had taken place in Western Desolation City. Amidst the frenzy, Mu Chen's famed sword, almost surpassing that of Shun Songxing. Such rapid growth left many students in awe. After all, Mu Chen had only been at Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy for a year. Yet his achievements were already making many students feel ashamed and amazed. At this point, no one doubted Mu Chen's abilities. Everyone knew that it wouldn't be long before Shun Songxing's title as heavenly ranking champion would be taken over. As for the excitement within the academy, Mu Chen, the central figure of the event, didn't seem to care much. Once back in the academy, he quietly retreated to the freshman district to rest and recover from the injuries sustained during his battle with the Devil Dragon Child. The title of heavenly ranking champion didn't interest him at all. Power was something personal. It wasn't about a title. And although he had barely won the battle in Western Desolation City, it didn't make him proud. Instead, it left him feeling some pressure. After all, according to the information he had received, the Devil Dragon Child, while ranked second on the Academy's bounty list, wasn't even considered a top-tier young talent on the entire North Song continent. Across this vast continent, there were others who truly represented the pinnacle of the younger generation's strength. And if Mu Chen wanted to catch up to them, he clearly still had a long way to go. Despite their longer cultivation time and older ages, Mu Chen wasn't about to use that as an excuse. 3 days after Mu Chen returned to the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, his injuries had fully healed. Though he had drawn upon the malevolent power of the great Xun'er demon pillar, which had caused internal injuries, his current strength made him far more resilient. He had developed considerable resistance to such corrosive forces, preventing him from suffering the same devastation as before. Once his injuries were healed, he unexpectedly received a summons from the Grand Song Academy headmaster. Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, Council Hall. As Mu Chen stood in the Grand Hall, his heart filled with astonishment. Before him were 6 figures, not only the Grand Song Academy headmaster, but also all 5 heavenly seed elders. This gathering represented the absolute highest authority of the academy. He Mu Chen, you did well this time. On behalf of the Punishment Hall, I want to express my gratitude. If not for you, our Punishment Hall would have suffered a great humiliation. Punishment Hall Master Mo Yu was the first to speak, offering Mu Chen a rare smile. Beside Mo Yu stood Elder Zhu Tian and 3 other heavenly seed elders. Unlike Zhu Tian, who had the appearance of a young boy, the others were aged, their white hair flowing like silk. Their deep, star-like eyes held an unfathomable wisdom. Though they exuded no spiritual energy, their mere presence radiated an overwhelming pressure, as if they could shatter the heavens with a mere gesture. 5 Supremes, plus the Grand Song Academy headmaster, that makes 6 Supremes. Mu Chen's heart trembled. This was the true might of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. It was their presence that made the academy an unshakable colossus within the North Song continent. After a moment, Mu Chen steadied himself and respectfully bowed to the 5 heavenly seed elders before turning to the Grand Song Academy headmaster. Headmaster, may I ask why you summoned me? The Grand Song Academy headmaster smiled and said, we called you here today because of the great Xun'er demon pillar within you. The 5 heavenly seed elders also turned their curious gazes toward Mu Chen. They were no strangers to the great Xun'er demon pillar. During the ancient battle between the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy and the Dragon Demon Palace, the White Dragon Supreme had defected from the Dragon Demon Palace, taking the pillar with him. Had that not happened, the outcome of that war might have been entirely different. They were well aware of the pillar's fearsome reputation. It was a supreme artifact capable of tempting even supreme stage experts. Though tainted with malevolence, anyone who mastered it could wield unfathomable power. And yet, such a terrifying object had now fallen into the hands of a mere freshman. That was truly unexpected. Mu Chen stiffened, his heartbeat quickening. Could it be that the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy wanted him to surrender the great Xun'er demon pillar? Don't worry. If our academy were to do such a thing, how would we be any different from the Dragon Demon Palace? Sensing Mu Chen's unease, the Grand Song Academy headmaster chuckled. Mu Chen felt a bit awkward at having his thoughts seen through so easily, but he could hardly be blamed. After all, the great Xun'er demon pillar was powerful enough to tempt even supreme stage experts. Although the pillar is in your possession now, that doesn't mean it truly belongs to you. Mo Yu smiled. Do you really think the Dragon Demon Palace would allow their greatest treasure to be taken so easily? Mu Chen's eyes flickered as his brows furrowed. Hall Master, are you saying the Dragon Demon Palace can still reclaim it? His expression grew more serious as he recalled the moment the Black Dragon Supreme had acted. If not for the intervention of the Grand Song Academy headmaster, the great Xun'er demon pillar might have been forcibly extracted from his body on the spot. The pillar has been in the hands of the Dragon Demon Palace for many years. As far as I know, it should contain the Dragon Demon brand. Given your current strength, you wouldn't be able to sense it. The Grand Song Academy headmaster's voice was calm but carried a deep weight. The Dragon Demon brand? Mu Chen was momentarily lost. He had never noticed anything like that within the pillar. It's a unique method of the Dragon Demon Palace, a mark personally placed by a supreme expert. It lies dormant deep within the great Xun'er demon pillar, completely undetectable under normal circumstances. But the moment the Dragon Demon Palace activates it, you will immediately lose control over the pillar. Worse still, if they harbor even the slightest killing intent, your life will be entirely in their hands. With just a single thought, even from thousands of miles away, They could trigger the pillar's power within you and obliterate you instantly. The speaker this time was Elder Zhu Tian. Stroking his chin, he gave Mu Chen a playful yet knowing look. A cold sweat broke out across Mu Chen's body. So, the great Xun'er demon pillar was essentially a ticking time bomb inside him? If the Dragon Demon Palace activated it, he would be utterly annihilated. In the past, you kept the pillar hidden, so this danger didn't exist. But now that it has been exposed, as long as you remain within the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, they may not act rashly. However, the moment you leave the Academy's protection, Mu Chen wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, feeling a sudden chill in his chi. He feared that the great Xun'er demon pillar might suddenly erupt in full force. The malevolent force at that level was beyond his current capabilities, and he simply wouldn't be able to withstand it. Headmaster called me over. He wouldn't just be trying to scare me, would he? Despite his initial nervousness, Mu Chen quickly calmed down. He raised his head and smiled at Taitsong, saying, "You're quite the clever little fellow." Taitsong chuckled and said, "You've successfully completed your task, and you deserve a reward. After discussing it, we've decided to help you erase the Dragon Demon brand from the Great Xun'er Demon Pillar. That way, we will sever the connection between the Dragon Demon Palace and the Great Xun'er Demon Pillar. As long as you can tame and control it, it will truly belong to you." Mu Chen's heart leaped with joy upon hearing this. The Dragon Demon brand had been placed there by the supreme ruler of the Dragon Demon Palace, and he clearly didn't have the power to remove it. Now, the only ones capable of helping him were Taitsong and the others. "Thank you, Headmaster." Mu Chen expressed his heartfelt gratitude. Taitsong waved his hand and nodded toward the other 5 heavenly seed elders. The 5 of them dispersed immediately. "Summon the great Xun'er demon pillar," Taitsong instructed. Mu Chen hesitated for a moment. The great Xun'er demon pillar was currently suppressed by the mysterious black paper inside his body. If he released it, it would undoubtedly cause a great commotion. However, when he saw Taitsong's reassuring smile, his worries eased. With 6 supreme beings guarding the area, he didn't believe the great Xun'er demon pillar would cause any trouble. With that thought, Mu Chen stopped hesitating. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his mind stirred. In his chi, the mysterious mandala flower began to slowly bloom, and the purple chains wrapped around the demon pillar retracted little by little. Boom! As the purple chains withdrew, the great Xun'er demon pillar suddenly shook violently. With a loud bang, it transformed into a scarlet light and shot out of Mu Chen's chi. Whoosh! The scarlet light shot up straight from Mu Chen's crown, and a black demon pillar followed, sweeping a terrifying malevolent force that filled the entire hall. Buzz! The hall trembled as the great Xun'er demon pillar expanded with the wind and shot toward the dome of the hall, attempting to escape. Humph! Taitsong let out a cold grunt as he looked at the enormous demon pillar. With a wave of his hand, the ceiling of the hall suddenly burst with blinding light. Countless massive light chains shot out, piercing through space, and wrapped around the great Xun'er demon pillar. "Suppress it!" Elder Mou, Elder Zhu Tian, and the other 3 heavenly seat elders shouted in unison. Their immense spiritual power, like a river of liquid, surged out from their palms, wrapping around the great Xun'er demon pillar and suppressing its malevolent force completely. Buzz, buzz! The great Xun'er demon pillar struggled madly, trying to break free, causing the space to crack around it. The 5 heavenly seed elders, including Elder Mou, wore solemn expressions. They were also slightly shaken. The great Xun'er demon pillar truly lived up to its reputation as an ancient evil artifact. Despite their combined efforts, they were still having difficulty completely suppressing it. However, although the great Xun'er demon pillar was powerful, the lineup here was too formidable. Over time, the tremors of the demon pillar gradually began to subside. Whoosh! Seeing this, Taitsong formed hand seals, and a vast stream of spiritual light shot out, covering the great Xun'er demon pillar like liquid. The liquid-like spiritual energy slowly penetrated into the demon pillar. As it did, Mu Chen saw dark and deep black light begin to appear on the surface of the pillar. From a distance, it looked like a swirling dragon demon pattern. Clearly, This was the dragon demon brand that Taitsong had mentioned. Erase it, Taitsong said coldly, glaring at the dragon demon brand as if it were a living creature. Boom. The vast spiritual power surged out as the six of them acted in unison, sweeping toward the dragon demon brand. Meanwhile, in a distant black palace, Black Dragon Supreme, who had been meditating, suddenly opened his eyes, and a cold glint flashed in his gaze. Taitsong, you dare erase the dragon demon brand. Fine, if you want to fight, then my dragon demon palace will fight you first. He suddenly stood up, and a low growl, akin to a dragon's roar, reverberated through the air. The space trembled, and the sound spread far and wide. As his growl echoed, from the deepest part of the massive black hall, which resembled an underground palace, several more dragon roars rang out. The space twisted, and 5 dark shadows emerged, stepping through the fabric of space and appearing inside the grand hall. With their arrival, an overwhelming pressure began to spread throughout the hall. These 5 individuals were unmistakably supreme beings. The vast spiritual energy flooded the hall. The energy here was incredibly pure, to the point that it seemed to have a liquid-like quality. Each pulse of spiritual energy could rival the limit of the energy contained within the body of a heaven-reaching stage expert. At the heart of this immense spiritual energy, the great Xun'er demon pillar emitted a continuous humming sound. The terrifying malevolent force that emanated from it was firmly suppressed by the surrounding energy, unable to break free. The demonic runes on the pillar writhed, and the dragon demon brand that coiled around it seemed to sense the imminent danger. It let out a low, rumbling growl, and eerie black light radiated from it, resisting the encroaching spiritual energy. However, despite its efforts, the dragon demon brand appeared weak against the actions of the 6 supreme experts. Even though it was deeply rooted within the pillar and could draw on the pillar's power, it began to show signs of dissipating under the overwhelming spiritual energy. Mu Chen stood at the farthest point, completely immobilized by the oppressive force of the 6 supreme beings unleashing their spiritual energy. The pressure was so great that even his powerful heaven transformation stage abilities seemed insignificant, leaving him frozen in place like an ant. Despite this, Mu Chen couldn't help but smile wryly. In front of the supreme experts, his late-stage heaven transformation strength was utterly powerless. Just the weight of their spiritual pressure was enough to render him motionless. The only consolation for Mu Chen was that the dragon demon brand was being erased, which would eliminate a significant hidden danger. Boom! Just as Mu Chen let out a sigh of relief, a sudden change occurred. The great Xun'er demon pillar exploded with an extraordinarily terrifying power. The dragon demon brand, which had been fading under the influence of the vast spiritual energy from Taitsong and the others, now erupted with a fierce black light. The sound of a dragon's roar rang out, and the dragon demon brand surged, breaking free from the pillar and transforming into an enormous, terrifying demon dragon. The demon dragon coiled, its entire body pitch black, exuding an intimidating aura. The surrounding space began to shatter under the force of its presence. Taitsong, do you think you can claim my dragon demon palace's treasure for yourself? It won't be so easy. The massive demon dragon's eyes, full of viciousness, locked onto everyone in the hall as it roared. Black Dragon Supreme? Mu Chen's heart skipped a beat when he heard the familiar voice. Black Dragon Supreme, you really couldn't resist, could you? Taitsong, seeing the scene unfold, merely smiled faintly, clearly unshocked. It seemed he had expected this to happen. You Dragon Demon Palace truly have no fear. You dare to break into the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy with just a projection? You've brought this upon yourselves. MOU, the Hall Master, sneered coldly. On the North Tsang continent, my Dragon Demon Palace can go wherever it pleases. Do you think you can stop us? The Demon Dragon's voice was chilling and filled with menace, different from the Black Dragon Supremes, but equally terrifying. Haha, if you hadn't triggered the Dragon Demon brand, we wouldn't have been able to project ourselves here. Today, we'll take advantage of the great Xun'er demon pillar's power and destroy all of you. A cruel and domineering laugh echoed from the demon dragon's body. So it wasn't just a projection, but the 6 hall masters of the Dragon Demon Palace. Have they all come? Elder Zhu Tian also sneered, his voice filled with disdain. 6 hall masters? Mu Chen's heart trembled as he gazed into the demon dragon's enormous eyes. There, black light surged, and he could vaguely make out 6 shadowy figures within, resembling the apparitions of demonic gods, creating an overwhelming pressure. Even if you've all come today, it won't change the outcome. Taitsong's deep eyes flickered with coldness. He then waved his sleeve, and the vast spiritual energy transformed into a roaring ocean, shattering space as it surged toward the coiled demon dragon. Mou and the other 5 heavenly seat elders acted simultaneously, releasing their own immense spiritual energy. Roar! The demon dragon bellowed, and with a swipe of its massive claws, it grabbed the great Xun'er demon pillar and struck out, cleaving through the spiritual ocean with brute force. At this moment, the great Xun'er demon pillar erupted with a terrifying malevolent force. The pillar swung, tearing apart the space itself, repelling the vast waves of spiritual energy with overwhelming power. Boom! Boom! A fearsome battle broke out within the grand hall. Mu Chen, startled, quickly leapt out of the hall, only to witness the reinforced spirit array that fortified the hall actually cracking with deep fissures. Bang! The cracks spread to their limits, and eventually, the hall could no longer withstand the terrifying impact and exploded. The shocking spiritual energy surged outward, like a storm ripping through the sky above the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, attracting the alarmed gazes of countless students. Boom! Under the watchful eyes of many, the hall exploded, and the massive demon dragon, holding the demon pillar, soared into the sky. Surrounding it, 6 streams of light shot towards the heavens, and a vast ocean of spiritual energy engulfed the area. The ocean of spiritual energy swept through, shattering space in its wake, its destructive power extreme and terrifying. The sudden and overwhelming clash left all the students stunned. They had never witnessed such a battle of this scale before. Alarm bells rang throughout the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, and many high-ranking officials of the academy rushed to the scene, their faces grim as they gazed at the battle in the sky, their eyes filled with shock. On a distant quiet mountain peak, 2 figures, one large and one small, were also watching the battle in the sky. It was Ling Shi and Xun'er. Such terrifying fluctuations of spiritual energy. Even the headmaster and the others have joined the fight, Xun'er exclaimed. That's the Dragon Demon Palace's people, right? Ling Shi's crescent-shaped brows furrowed slightly as she stared at the demon dragon. Big sister Ling Shi, aren't you going to make a move? That demon dragon seems incredibly powerful, Xun'er said with concern. After all, they were within the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, and if any students were caught in the crossfire, the consequences would be dire. Ling Shi gently shook her head and replied calmly, "The demon dragon is merely a projection of those people from the Dragon Demon Palace. It can't possibly contend with Headmaster Taitsong and the others, so there's no need for me to intervene." As she spoke, her gaze shifted slightly to a mountain peak below the battle circle, where she vaguely spotted a slender figure. It was Mu Chen. She stared at him, and her eyes subtly flickered. Mu Chen didn't notice Ling Shi's gaze from afar. Instead, he was looking up at the sky. Despite the tremendous turmoil, he wasn't overly worried, for it was clear the battle was under the control of Headmaster Taitsong and the others. The 6 hall masters of the Dragon Demon Palace were merely projections. Even though they were borrowing the power of the great Xun'er demon pillar, they still couldn't truly rival Headmaster Taitsong and his team. At this rate, it wouldn't be surprising for Headmaster Taitsong to emerge victorious. Black Dragon Supreme, why bother with such futile efforts? You cannot take it away from the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy today, Headmaster Taitsong said coldly. Humph, is that so? A chilling laugh echoed from the Black Dragon Supreme. The eyes of the demon dragon seemed to glow with a sinister light, and then, the demon dragon's body suddenly began to expand wildly. The 6 faint shadows in its giant eyes exploded in an instant. Be careful, they're about to self-destruct the projections. Headmaster Taitsong's eyes narrowed, and he shouted, "Boom!" As soon as his voice fell, the demon dragon had expanded to nearly 10,000 zhang in size, blocking out the sun. In the next moment, it exploded, unleashing a nearly destructive shockwave that spread toward the academy below. The 6 figures of Headmaster Taitsong and his team immediately retreated at lightning speed. With a single slap, a vast ocean of spiritual energy spread beneath their hands, enveloping the academy below. Boom! Boom! The devastating shockwave collided with the ocean of spiritual energy, emitting a deep rumble, but it didn't penetrate, allowing the pale-faced students below to breathe a slight sigh of relief. Whoosh! As Headmaster Taitsong and his team held back the destructive shockwaves, a blood-red light shot toward the sky. The great Xun'er demon pillar shot out, and the space ahead twisted violently, forming a passage. "Don't let it escape." Headmaster Taitsong's expression darkened. These dragon demon palace people were ruthless and decisive, trying to let the great Xun'er demon pillar escape alone. But now, taking advantage of the explosion of the projection, the great Xun'er demon pillar's speed surged. In the blink of an eye, it entered the spatial passage, preparing to slip away. Just as it was about to slip through the spatial passage, the sky suddenly darkened. Countless people looked up in shock, only to see an enormous pair of wings, stretching across the horizon, unfolding from the heavens. The entire sky was cast into shadow beneath those wings. Boom! From beneath the wings, a pitch-black claw shot down like a thunderbolt. Space itself shattered under its grasp, and the claw pierced into the spatial passage, seizing the great Xun'er demon pillar within its colossal grip. As swiftly as it had appeared, the immense wings withdrew. Sunlight returned, and the eerie phenomenon vanished without a trace. The stunned students exchanged bewildered glances, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. What was that just now? It looked like a wing? A massive wing. Could it be Lord North Abyss Dragon Kuon, the guardian beast of our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy? That was incredible. It even tore through space itself. The entire Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy erupted into a clamor of excitement. On a distant mountain peak, Mu Chan stood in stunned amazement. Before he could regain his senses, a streak of black light shot across the sky, straight into his body. It was the great Xun'er demon pillar. Mu Chen's heart tensed. Within his Dantian Sea, the mandala flower instantly blossomed, sending countless dark violet chains surging forth. They coiled around the demon pillar in an instant, dragging it forcefully into the heart of the flower. A violet radiance spread out, sealing it away once more. Exhaling deeply, Mu Chen finally relaxed. Seeing the great Xun'er demon pillar sealed again lifted a massive burden off his shoulders. To deal with the dragon demon brand, even the strongest figures of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy had taken action. The Grand Song Academy headmaster and the others descended from the sky, appearing beside Mu Chan. "Haha, it's fortunate that Lord North Abyss stepped in. Otherwise, we would have failed this time," said Mou with a chuckle. "These guys were ruthless. They detonated their own projections. That will definitely cause some damage to their real bodies," Elder Zhu Tian remarked with a frown. The Grand Song Academy headmaster merely smiled. Looking at Mu Chan, he said, "But as long as we didn't lose it, that's what matters. From now on, the Dragon Demon Palace will no longer be able to control the great Xun'er Demon Pillar. If you can master it, it will be yours." "Thank you, Headmaster," Mu Chen said, filled with gratitude. This had resolved a monumental crisis for him. If he had to deal with it alone, he wouldn't have stood a chance. After all, he was nowhere near capable of facing 6 supreme powerhouses, even if they were just projections. The Grand Song Academy headmaster waved a hand dismissively, saying nothing more as he turned to leave. "Headmaster," Mu Chen called out. As the headmaster turned back, Mu Chen hesitated for a moment before gathering his courage. "I have some interest in the Sacred Spirit Mountain." "The Sacred Spirit Mountain?" Mou and the others froze before their expressions turned grim. This had long been a sore spot for the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Though they were a dominant force in the North Song continent, they had never been allowed to participate in its grandest event. Over the years, There had been no shortage of whispers and rumors about it. "It's too dangerous," the Grand Song Academy headmaster replied after a glance at Mu Chun. He shook his head and turned to leave. Mu Chun let out a bitter laugh, disappointment clear in his expression. It seemed he truly had no fate with the sacred spirit baptism. However, just as the headmaster was about to step into the great hall, his footsteps halted. Hands clasped behind his back, he stood silent for a moment before speaking in a calm, measured voice. "If you truly wish to go, then break through to the heaven-reaching stage within a month." Mu Chin's heart leaped with joy, only to immediately sink again.